What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut, and today we're going to be doing our first NFL playoff prediction video. Now, the standings I currently have are through week 12, so of course things are going to change. Some teams are in a bit of a free fall, other teams are red hot right now. Most teams have had their byes, some teams have not, and of course a bye week does impact how you've been, where you're seated, and all that good stuff. So, without further ado, what I'm going to do is we're going to start by looking at the AFC. So on the AFC side, right now, Baltimore would be the 1 seed, followed by New England against the LA Chargers, the 2v7. Tennessee is currently the 3, Buffalo being the 6. And Kansas City holds on to the 4th spot, while Cincinnati would be the top wildcard team. So let's start by looking at the 2v7 New England versus LA. So this is a game that's going to be fun to watch, regardless what happens. We saw these two teams play not too long ago, week 9, I believe it was, and the Patriots would win this game. It wasn't a pretty game for the Chargers. The Chargers did not look that great. The Chargers' offense has been kind of trending in the wrong direction as well. On the flip side, Mac Jones is looking like he's going to be the frontrunner for Offensive Rookie of the Year, if not Rookie of the Year in general. He's been amazing. He's just been looking so good. He's proving that he's the best, most pro-ready quarterback, I should say, from the 2021 draft. A lot of people are pumping up Trevor Lawrence. I was always kind of skeptical, but we're not here to talk about Trevor Lawrence. Mac Jones is there. Jacoby Myers is slowly developing into a true wide receiver 1, and they have the weapons around the team as well. Defensively speaking, New England has strong players. Of course, they spent a ton of money on free agents this past offseason. So New England, they want to compete now. This is Bill Belichick. He's always competing. He's always competitive. On the flip side, you got the Chargers. Now, the Chargers are a team I'm a fan of. I do like what the Chargers have brought to the team, to the fan base, and all that good stuff. But the problem with the Chargers is they started off hot. Now, Herbert is playing with a bit of an injury, so there is that. But Mike Williams is basically a non-factor at this point, which is kind of disappointing. He started off the year as one of the best receivers in the league, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case for the time being. And their receiving stats outside of Keenan Allen have just been trending in the wrong direction. Again, I think this does have to do with Herbert's injury, but there's that. And at least Austin Eckler is producing right now. On the flip side, on the defensive side of the ball, the Chargers' defense is what it is. They still need a good run stuffer on their D-line, but they don't have that. They do have Bosa, so at least you got Joey Bosa. Outside of that, their secondary's been okay, but not spectacular. So there are some concerns with the Chargers. Now, I have New England beating the Chargers, and to me, it's not going to be that great of a game. Especially since it's in Foxborough in January, the weather will probably impact this game. So that's never good. Foxborough isn't a dome. That does hurt the Chargers to an extent. So right now, I do have the Patriots coming out on top over the Chargers. So next we have the 3 seed Tennessee Titans versus the 6 seed Buffalo Bills. This is going to be another good game. Now these two teams did meet earlier in the year, and in that game, Tennessee pulled off the victory. However, they had Derrick Henry for that game. So let's talk about Henry real quick. Derrick Henry obviously was playing like the best running back in the game before he got hurt. Now, they're hoping that he can be back in time for early January. Will he be back in time for week 16? I don't know. It's going to really depend on how they're sitting. If they're currently locked into like the 3rd seed, there's no point in them rushing him back. But again, that's an optimistic viewpoint that he'll be back in time for early January. He might not be back until late January. If not, he might not return this season. I'm going under the assumption that he's going to be back in a limited role coming into the playoffs. That's what I'm going to assume. So he's not going to be the Derrick Henry that we saw run all over the Bills. Now, just like their previous meeting, this game will be held in Tennessee. So that does slightly help the Titans. But their offense has become very predictable recently, ever since Henry went down. And, what the problem is they also lost Julio Jones, and now A.J. Brown's on the IR. So their offense is definitely struggling. Ryan Tannehill can't do it all. He's not a mobile quarterback. So you basically have a pocket passer and a running game that's not as good as it was. Defensively, the Titans are still the Titans. They're not a top-tier defense in the league. This is a team that was shockingly upset by the Texans in Week 11. So there are some concerns for the Titans. I don't see them holding on to this seed right now. On the flip side, we have another team that's currently in free fall in the Buffalo Bills. The Bills look like they were going to be the class of the AFC East this year, but I have no idea what's going on with the Buffalo Bills right now. Their running game isn't established as well as it should be. They are still getting solid games here from Moss and Singletary, but it's not as good as it should be. The passing game isn't what it should be. I mean, they're still producing, but it's not at the level that you'd expect. The Bills' offense is there. Don't get me wrong. I'm probably underselling the Bills' offense, but they still have a lot of problems that they need to address sooner rather than later. Now's not the best time to be struggling, but at least you have the time. It's better to struggle week 10 through 12 than it is to struggle during the playoffs. That's for sure. Now, their defense has been probably their Achilles heel so far. Teams are able to kind of dissect the defense bit by bit, pick them apart and keep games close. So that's going to be the problem for the Bills. So, like I said with Henry, I'm going to go under the assumption that either Brown or Jones will be on the team. I'm kind of just trying to make it as even as possible for the Titans. So I'm going to say Brown's healthy, Jones is not. So basically, this wouldn't be the prettiest game. And with how things are currently trending, this won't happen in the playoffs. Both of these teams are in a bit of a free fall right now. Buffalo probably has a better chance to right their ship than Tennessee does, all things considered. So, how do I have this game going? I think the Bills are going to get revenge from their previous loss to the Titans. They know better. They have to be able to get the win. And, they learn from their mistakes. Their offense is clicking, and that's what matters. So, lastly, in the AFC, we have the 4-seed Kansas City versus the 5-seed Cincinnati. Not going to lie. I was a little surprised when I saw these seeds, but here we are. So first things first, Kansas City is trending in the absolute correct direction. They have figured out what their problems were towards the middle of the season. They've righted those problems. Mahomes still has some concerns. Mahomes isn't doing all that great. He's doing decent, but he's not doing all that great. That's the problem. He just torched the Raiders Week 11, but he laid up another stinker the next game. So there are some concerns with Patrick Mahomes still. But outside of Mahomes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is back. That's a positive. They kind of wanted him back. They were waiting for him to come back. Now that he's back, it's a good thing. Outside of him, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce are both still great receiving options. Defensively is where the Kansas City Chiefs have their problems. That's been the case for a while. That and the offensive line. And unfortunately, while they tried to address both those problems, they did somewhat fix some of the problems on the O-line, but the defense is still a bit of a liability. Teams are still able to put up good points against Kansas City. On the flip side, you got Cincinnati. Cincinnati is in a weird position. They just demolished Pittsburgh, which put them here in the 5 seed, Week 12. So, I don't know what to think about them. We saw their receiving game really taking off early in the season, but Week 12, their run game was starting to establish itself as well. Mixon looking great. Jamar Chase is still a very valuable asset, but we haven't seen as much use from him because Joe Burrow isn't airing out as much as he was before. You have to wonder if that injury that he suffered earlier in the season is something that's actually affecting him with his throat. It could be that he's not really willing to air it out as much. So, yeah, the Titans almost said. The Bengals defense is there, though. They're still playing at a solid level. They're getting solid pass rush. They're getting turnovers. Their linebacking core is playing better than I was expecting. The secondary is playing better than I was expecting. So, how do I have this game going? Sorry, Bengals. I think if this game was in Cincinnati, it could favor the Bengals. But because we're in Kansas City, I gotta go with the Chiefs. So, from here on out, I'm not going to go into complete detail about every team because that's not logical. We already went into it. So, next, we'll go with the 1 seed versus the now 6 seed. Seeds won't really matter. So we will discuss the Ravens here. Baltimore, they've had some bad games. Of course, losing to the Dolphins wasn't the prettiest sight, but the Dolphins are one of the hotter teams in football right now, and they are slowly trying to make their way back to the playoff picture. It's going to take some luck, but it's possible still. Baltimore, though, the offense obviously runs through Lamar Jackson. Hollywood Brown has been doing it. Mark Andrews hasn't been the best, but he's at least doing a solid job, all things considered. So, they're ready. The defense has had some problems, but they're still there. They're still producing. They're still able to keep games very close. So, how do I have this game going? Now, I could have sworn that these two teams played earlier in the season. Alas, they did not. So, I'm kind of going off of speculation, but I do have to say, the Baltimore Ravens are a very good team. They're one of the better teams in the league, all things considered, and they just, Lamar Jackson he's not playing at the level he was to start the season, but he's still playing at a very high level. Therefore, I don't see Baltimore losing here. Baltimore has had their little bit of a, I don't want to call it rivalry with the Bills, but they'll once more get the upper hand. So that has New England versus Kansas City here in the other AFC divisional round game. And this is going to be another fun one. So these two teams haven't played this year either, but it's a rivalry because you got Mahomes going up against Mac Jones, I guess. I mean, they don't have a rivalry yet, but they could definitely get one in the future. Namely, you got Andy Reid versus Bill Belichick. These are two coaches that have long hated each other, relatively speaking. They've gone up against each other for the past 20 plus years. Reid was always an assistant, was one of the top rated assistants in football in the 90s. Belichick was struggling over in Cleveland. Of course, their first big rivalry was in 2004 in the Super Bowl. Belichick got the upper hand. Reid got his revenge about a decade and a half later, but still, Belichick is probably a better coach. The fact that New England would have the home game here does heavily favor New England. Like I said before with Los Angeles, Kansas City playing in the Northeast is always a problem, especially when there's no dome. If there was a dome, it wouldn't be as bad. But we've seen Mahomes go out in the cold weather and play well. So it's not as critical as it would be for Justin Herbert. But still, it's the way these two teams have been playing. These are two of the hottest teams in football right now. Both of these teams are producing at high levels. They're both ready to go. They both have had some good games against good opponents recently. So it's tough. I was, really just debating this one. I was bouncing it around. I'm thinking, okay, who's going to win this game? Who would win this game between these two teams? And I originally wrote down one team, and then I scratched it out, wrote the other one. I'm going back with my original gut. My original gut was I had the New England Patriots winning. And I hate having New England win, but alas, that's where we are. I just think New England, Mac Jones, can do it. It's going to be tough, but I really think Kansas City has a really good chance of winning here. But sometimes you got to go with the slight underdog. So that would make the AFC Championship game a battle between Baltimore and New England. Now, these two teams haven't played this year, so it's kind of hard to go off of that. But, you got Bill Belichick, who's constantly one of the people who's always out there and always willing to play ball, versus John Harbaugh, sorry. So you have two very talented coaches, both of whom have won a Super Bowl, of course, but obviously Belichick's a more successful coach. And then you go to the quarterback room. We've seen Lamar struggle in the playoffs, and it's very unfortunate. But each year, he seems to take a step forward. The mobility is going to be a little bit of a problem for New England, but I think they can plan for it. Playing Mahomes and Herbert before won't necessarily help them. Mahomes does move, but he's not the most mobile quarterback in the game. Plus, now you're playing in Baltimore. On the flip side, you do have Matthew Judon, who switched from Baltimore to New England this past offseason. He will probably be able to, kind of tip off his fellow teammates and say, hey, listen, they might try to run this type of scheme. They might try to run this type of scheme on you. That's always something. So you got to take that with a grain of salt, though. It is the NFL. I'm sure the Ravens know that, and they have to be prepared for it. But like I said before, there haven't been any major injuries with either of these teams, all things considered, of course, excluding the running back position. I mean, Baltimore, you could write a story about their running backs that got hurt. James White for New England. So this is going to be a good game, but you do have to give the edge. I'm going to give the edge to Baltimore just because I think Lamar has enough. He wants to get a Super Bowl appearance at least. So now we go to the NFC. So if the playoffs started today, Arizona would be the 1 seed, and then you would have the 2 seed Green Bay Packers playing host to the 7 seed Minnesota Vikings. Great rivalry game, no less. The 3 seed Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing host to the 6 seed San Francisco 49ers. Tom Brady revenge game. And the 4 seed Dallas Cowboys playing host to the 5 seed Los Angeles Rams. Nothing great there, historically speaking. So, how do I have these games going? We will start with the Packers versus the Vikings. So, Green Bay, very talented offense. But right now, Aaron Rodgers' toe injury is on the forefront of everyone's discussions. There are concerns about it. Now, they do have their bye week coming up, so hopefully him just resting his toe will be enough. It is something that he could need surgery on, but it sounds like he's not going to get the surgery. There was a report earlier this week saying he wasn't going to get the surgery on his toe. So that does favor Green Bay, but it also hurts them a little bit. But then again, Rodgers isn't necessarily a mobile quarterback. Aaron Jones should be back in time for the playoffs, so we're just going to say he's back. We'll go with that. We're just going to say Aaron Jones is playing, all things considered. Devontae Adams is still one of the better players in the league. Unfortunately, their tight end position has been a bit of a letdown. Of course, Tanyan, massive disappointment this year before he tore his ACL. And their defense is still okay. There's still some holes on the defense, but the offense is just so talented, they're able to kind of negate that. Minnesota, on the flip side, they're the only team that would be in the playoffs right now that are below 500. They have 2 teams breathing down their necks as well when it comes to the playoffs. If they were to start today, New Orleans and Atlanta are tied with them for record. Now, Minnesota gets in based on a tiebreaker over Atlanta because Atlanta has a tiebreaker over New Orleans. So, I mean, if you're a Vikings fan, the Eagles and people seem to help you guys out. That's neither here nor there. The Vikings offense has been very tough to watch at times. Justin Jefferson is having a solid sophomore season. Very happy to see that. There were concerns, of course, with him, but Adam Thielen isn't the player he was a few years back. He has taken a step back. Kirk Cousins, still struggling. Now Dalvin Cook is dealing with a dislocated shoulder, not to mention the torn labrum in his other. So, I mean, there are problems with this Vikings team. There are definitely injury concerns with the Vikings. I'm going to assume, because I gave Green Bay Aaron Jones, I'm going to give Minnesota Dalvin Cook, but I'm going to say Dalvin Cook will still be playing injured to an extent, so that does hurt the Vikings. And defensively, Minnesota isn't the defense that they were a few years back. And while Minnesota did pull the upset over Green Bay earlier this season, to me, there's not really a discussion. Green Bay, now you're playing host to them. These 2 teams do play soon, and it will be in Green Bay. So that game would be the more telling game, more telling matchup between the 2 teams. But we're just going to go with Green Bay over Minnesota. I think Aaron Rodgers, he wants to get that other Super Bowl ring because once he gets a second ring, he's just going to demand his way out of Green Bay, and they're going to let him go, and Green Bay is going to get a fortune for him. Tampa Bay versus San Francisco. So I said before, this is a Tom Brady revenge game. Tom Brady is, of course, from the San Francisco Bay Area. He grew up a Niners fan, and they chose not to sign him, and they chose not to draft him. So, you know, he still has a bit of a chip on his shoulder with San Francisco. So, Brady is obviously the best quarterback of all time, and he's been playing at a high level this year. And he just has so many different weapons. You know, you can't even count them on one hand. If you're able to stop Antonio Brown, guess what? There's Gronkowski wide open because you slowed down Brown. Oh, you're able to stop both of them? Guess what? Look who you got downfield, Chris Godwin. Somehow you stop all 3 of them. Mike Evans in the slot, wide open. Somehow you stop the receiving game. They'll just run on you. They got Ronald Jones. They got Leonard Fournette. There's just so many options on this offense. And I didn't even mention the backup tight ends, O.J. Howard. There's just so many options on this offense. And unfortunately for them, Antonio Brown is currently dealing with an injury, but he should be back in time for the playoffs. Brady is healthy. The rest of his team is healthy. So, yeah. Now, their problem is, of course, their defense. Their secondary in particular has just been injured after injury, after injury, after injury, after injury, etc., etc., etc. They cannot stay healthy in that secondary. That will be their Achilles heel, all things considered. Fortunately for them, they have the offensive firepower to keep up with any team. And the way Brady plays, he can pick you apart bit by bit. You see it every time Tampa Bay plays. Now, they are trending in a slightly wrong direction, but I think they're going to be able to return once they get some return to normalcy in their secondary. Then you get to San Francisco. Now, I'm surprised that San Francisco would currently be in the playoffs, but they've been playing better than I thought. So, of course, Trey Lance may not be the guy for right now. It would be Jimmy Garoppolo, so it'd be a battle of two former New England quarterback teammates, if you will. So, yeah, obviously I'd have to give the edge to Brady there. The rest of the weapons on offense, I mean, the San Francisco running back room, who knows what's going on? You get all these different guys. Right now, Elijah Mitchell is the guy, but he's been dealing with a nagging injury. So, receiving core, definite edge to Tampa Bay as well. Offensive line, definite edge to Tampa Bay. Defensive line, edge to Tampa Bay, but not by that much because you do have to respect Nick Bosa and other players on this line. Linebacking core, slight edge to Tampa. Secondary is the only thing I'll give the edge to San Francisco, and that's just because Tampa is so depleted right now. As much as I'd like to see the upset get pulled here, it's going to be Tampa Bay that wins this game. All things considered, they get the home game, so Tom Brady gets his revenge on the team that refused to pick him up. So lastly, we have the Dallas Cowboys versus the Los Angeles Rams. Starting with Dallas, this team is in a little bit of a free fall right now, but I expect this to end very soon. The Cowboys are dealing with injuries. Dak Prescott, of course, did miss a game. He's back. He's seemingly fully healthy. You never know with the NFL. They'll tell you they're healthy when they're not because it's a competitive disadvantage to tell your opponents, I'm hurt. You never want to do that stuff. Running back, Ezekiel Elliott is expected to have his carries limited now. Tony Pollard, very strong running back too. I'm a big Pollard fan. I've mentioned this in numerous videos before. Love the kid, went to Memphis. But he is not a running back one. That just doesn't happen. That's not what he is. He's not a running back one. Simple as that. He's a very good complementary back, but I would never want him being my running back one. In a playoff game, I'd be even more concerned about that. On the flip side, in the receiving core is where you got the injuries right now. Amari Cooper, currently dealing with a certain viral illness. We'll have to see what happens with that, but we have to see what happens when he plays. That's the big thing, because sometimes you can come back from it. Sometimes people struggle after coming back, especially a skill player, someone who relies on speed. Of course, CeeDee Lamb dealing with a concussion. He should again be back. He will be back in time for the playoffs unless something bad happens. So we'll give him a fully healthy Lamb and possibly a little shaken up Amari Cooper. But I just expect Dak to keep it going. Dalton Schultz has broken out this year, so you got to give him that too. Offensive line, still one of the best in football. Defensive side of the ball, there are still some concerns here, but I think they can right the ship. Right the wrong. Micah Parsons, I got to give him a shout out, has been spectacular. I mentioned before who my offensive rookie of the year would be, and Mac Jones. Defensive rookie of the year, Micah Parsons, not even close. Not even close. No debating it. Dallas got themselves a gem with Parsons. Now, the Rams were one of the best teams to start off the season, and I was high on the Rams. In my original, standings predictions, I never do playoff predictions early on. I had the Rams winning the NFC West. And I kind of was expecting backlash. I didn't get much. And I like Matthew Stafford. Stafford has cooled down a bit since a red-hot start, but he is still very good. The running back game, if they still had Cam Akers, if he didn't get hurt to start the season, this team would be higher in the standings, and it would make this an even more interesting team to watch. But Darrell Henderson has been very good. And it's going to be fun to watch Henderson and Pollard because they're both, went to Memphis, both running backs, both similar players. Henderson, though, can run a little bit more, all things considered. So I'd be excited to watch that. The receiving game is where there are some problems with the Rams. Cooper Kupp is probably the best wide receiver in football this year. I think I'm not making too bold of a statement by saying Cooper Kupp is the best receiver in the NFL in 2021. So there's that. Unfortunately, Robert Woods did tear his ACL. He's out for the year. But now you got Odell Beckham Jr., who did catch his first touchdown of the season. So you got to give him that in Week 12. But there are still concerns with the Rams. Definitely are concerns with the Rams. And, their defense, though, is stacked. They stacked up this defense. I don't want to call it a super defense, but it's kind of a super defense. So, all things considered, I like what the Rams have. I like what the Cowboys have. But who do I have winning this game? I think this is going to be a very competitive, very close game, all things considered. I have to give the slight edge, though, to, unfortunately for me, Dallas. I personally would love to see the Rams win, but it's just not going to happen. So unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, I do have the 2, 3, and 4 seeds all advancing in the NFC. We'll start off with the 1v4. So Arizona. The Cardinals are a very good team. This is a team that, they're in a little bit of a free fall right now to an extent, but that's because Kyler's out. This is Kyler Murray's team. Kyler is spectacular. Kyler Murray, one of the best quarterbacks in the game by far. He's got that dual-way play style, but he doesn't use his legs like Lamar. He uses them when he has to. The running game, you have two very strong options. You got a strong 1-2 punch in Connor and Edmonds, but you're not overly reliant on one more than the other. You put him out there and you see what happens. DeAndre Hopkins, the trade steal of the 21st century up to this point. Very spectacular player. Christian Kirk, very spectacular receiver. Unfortunately, if they had Max Williams, they'd be a little better off, but their tight end position still has some problems, all things considered. Offensive line, not the best, but Rodney Hudson was a good addition for them this past offseason. Defensive side of the ball, I wish J.J. Watt was playing, but he seems like he's done for the year. Very unfortunate. I'd love to see Watt in a competitive team. But outside of that, the defense doesn't match up as well as I'd like. There's not a lot of huge names on it outside of Budda Baker. But they still have a very talented defense, all things considered. Dallas v. Arizona would be a close game. But, this would be a high-scoring game. I just think, with how things have been going recently, and again, I'm assuming Kyler is healthy, Arizona will get the victory. Lastly, we got the 2 seed Green Bay Packers playing host to the 3 seed Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay pulled off the upset last year by defeating Green Bay in Lambeau Field. Can it happen 2 years in a row would be the narrative of this discussion. Potentially the last battle of two of the best quarterbacks in the game's history. Aaron Rodgers v. Tom Brady. Because we don't know what's going to happen with Rodgers in 2022. If he goes to the AFC division that the Bucs are playing this year, these two quarterbacks might never meet again. So, how would it go? Again, I'm assuming the injuries are the same. I just think there's too much going on it for Rodgers. I think Rodgers is going to say enough is enough. He's going to be able to guide his team past Tom Brady's Buccaneers. So that would make an NFC Championship game of the Green Bay Packers versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now, these two teams did meet earlier in the season, so that does kind of sway how I have this going. Plus, now you have the injuries to Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he'll be fully healthy. That doesn't help him. That doesn't help the Packers. Especially now, I think he's going to put his heart and soul on the field to knock out Tampa Bay. Can he go into the desert and beat Kyler Murray and the Cardinals? That's where it gets tough. And I have to say, as boring as it is, you got to go with the Arizona Cardinals. So in other words, I have the 2-1 seeds making the Super Bowl. And I hate to do it, but that's what I have. I really could see Green Bay. I had originally written down Arizona, and I was debating there to the very end. Green Bay, Green Bay, Green Bay. I could see Aaron Rodgers doing it, but I just think he's going to be gassed a bit. It's going to be tough for him. It's going to be tough for the team to go from a cold climate to a warm climate like that. Although, at least Arizona is a dome, but again, it doesn't necessarily matter. So that would make my Super Bowl matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Arizona Cardinals. Very good Super Bowl right off the bat. You got two of the better mobile quarterbacks in the game. And then, you get the running backs. You have a healthy backfield in Arizona versus an unhealthy backfield in Baltimore. Receiving game, edge goes to Arizona. Offensive line-wise, about a draw. Maybe an edge goes to Arizona. Defensively speaking, you got to give an edge to Arizona again. But when you get on the field, that's where things get more fun. Game planning. Edge goes to Baltimore. Baltimore has been here before. Arizona missed out on the playoffs last year. The pressure might get to Kyler Murray, all things considered. But how would I have this Super Bowl going? This is where I'm going to have a little bit of controversy. I would have the Baltimore Ravens hoisting the Lombardi Trophy, which of course would mean Kyler Murray would kind of put himself in a position where he has to wait. It would stink for someone like J.J. Watt, who may have had his last true chance on getting a Super Bowl ring. But, there's just so many players. I think John Harbaugh, like I said before, he's done it. He's gotten himself to the Super Bowl before. And he won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. If you can win a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco, you should get one with Lamar Jackson. But anyways, this was a fun video. I have the Baltimore Ravens winning the Super Bowl 57. So, very excited for that one. Hope you guys enjoyed this. This was my first NFL playoff predictions. Next one won't be as long. This one, of course, 32 minutes and counting. But if you stayed through, hope you enjoyed it. Have a good rest of your day.